All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Startup Blender podcast. My name is Ucha, and today we have exciting guest from the UK. Simon is with us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Ucha. How you doing?
Good, good. How's your day going?
Really well. We're recording this on the first proper day back in
Yeah,
the office after
absolutely. Yeah.
Christmas, and so it's been a busy one trying to catch up with everything that's been going on over the break, but it's going well, and it's nice to take a little bit of a break from it to chat to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, but to get listeners up to speed, tell us all about you. Like, who are you? What you do?
Sure. So I'm Simon Vincent. I'm a marketer by background. I've been doing this for best part of 20 years now. I started in journalism actually, and then kind of progressively moved into kind of PR and then marketing through that route. Uh, for a long time, I was working in agencies in London, working with big global clients. Um, and then about 7 years ago, kind of went out on my own, started a fractional CMO agency, I guess you might call it, or a fractional CMO service. Um, and then just in the last couple of years, have kind of really started to embrace the generative AI stuff as part of marketing and moved into that. So now I have two companies, X-CMO, which is my fractional CMO agency, and then Kayako AI, which is the one that does the generative AI content as well.
That sounds very interesting, and it seems like there's a lot to uncover in this episode. But let's start from the beginning. How you mentioned that? So you started in journalism, but then switched to marketing. But those fields are quite connected and quite similar to each other. So how and why did you choose the career path you're on? What was your main motivation from the beginning?
Yeah, I think I was always into writing.
Yeah.
That was fundamentally my kind of passion when I was younger. I liked English, growing up. I was a good writer, and the other thing about kind of studying English in England is the fact that you don't just study the writing of it, but you study the purpose behind it, right? So there's always that section of kind of studying your home language where you're reading Shakespeare and your teachers are
Yeah.
telling you why Shakespeare was talking about things he was talking about, or why he was making decisions he was, and all of those sorts of things. And I think both of those two things really appeal to me. Both understanding how to um, the articulation of ideas, the words that are used and the reasons why they're used, but also understanding the sort of the psychology or the political issues or whatever it is that kind of underpins them, and kind of the marriage of those two things. How do you see something that happens in the world and make a comment on it, but do it in such a way that is interesting and compelling, and brings people with you, and all of those sorts of things. So that's kind of, like I say, when I was at school, that was kind of always what appealed to me. And initially, to be honest with you, I didn't. I mean, I don't. I think most people don't grow up knowing what marketing is. I don't. I
Yeah.
don't think most young
Me neither.
people
Me neither.
told what marketing is. So the only profession that I could think of that kind of allowed me to write was journalism when I was growing up. And it was really only when I got to doing a journalism master's degree that the first person came, like another tutor who did PR, came in and did a talk to all of us in our class. And this guy was like, I know now that he was, trying to push us and trying to challenge us and stuff. But he just comes into this class and he's like, you journalists, I really respect what you guys do. You work every hour of the day for very low pay, and often in very difficult, situations, doing horrible things. And here I am in PR. I get all my weekends and evenings off. I get Christmas
Yeah.
off. I get paid loads of money to promote people's stuff and have an easy life. He's like, I really respect the fact that you guys do all of that, and here we are. Here I am making an easy living. And I was like, well, actually, if the two things are so similar, I'm quite happy to do the PR side of things, and like I say, also the other thing I think that I found at the same time was that journalism, to a certain degree, ends up being quite scientific. It ends up
Yeah.
being quite specific, and you're sort of formulaic in a sense. You are writing
Yeah.
often the facts of what has happened, whereas PR gave me the opportunity to write a bit more creatively, and like I say, that kind of I kind of liked staying in PR. To be honest with you, the move into the wider marketing thing was partly influenced by social media.
Uh-huh.
I was working in my career in sort of 2006, 7, 8. When kind of Facebook
Yeah.
was pretty much the only social media channel at that point, maybe Twitter a little bit. And I remember going to the owner of the PR agency I worked for and saying to her, like, I think this Facebook thing's going to be big. Like, I
Yeah.
think people are going to use it for like, I think businesses are going to start using it, and I think it's going to be really big. And funny enough, at the time, I remember her saying to me, she said, these are her words, oh, but Facebook's only for 14-year-old girls. They
Uh-huh.
were the words that she said. And I remember at the time I was quite junior, I was quite young in my career, and I kind of took it on board, and I was like, oh, maybe it's a bit silly that I'm kind of interested in this stuff. Maybe I should just park it, and kind of continue to work in social media, but never really pushed it as strongly as that. And obviously we know the journey that kind of social media has gone on in the last 20 years from, kind of the heights of where Facebook was at times to kind of where we are now, I suppose, with it. And I think that experience was kind of fundamentally what led me to sort of really embrace generative AI when I saw that coming out in the last couple of years, and just sort of say, well, look, this has the potential to be
Yeah.
as big as social media in the fullness of time, and it's something that I need to keep abreast of, and if I feel like it's going to go somewhere, then why not lead the charge this way, like I probably should have done
Yeah.
20 years ago with social and kind of got talked out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love the story you said, because I can imagine like the person you spoke to was so much into the industry, didn't even consider Facebook and social media being successful. But you were new and you had all these new ideas and probably the enthusiasm too. So
Mm,
you had all these like new ideas, and I mean, this is very common
yeah.
case that is happening, that all the professionals that know too much about their fields often don't see the new innovations that are coming up, but new enthusiasts are the ones that spot those trends. But yeah, love the story. Very interesting. So, moving forward, like after that, you decided you wanted to work in a PR. So what's the story behind getting your first job in the marketing and in this field, in the writing field?
Yeah, I think so. I think having made the transition from journalism into PR, I moved into PR, and just sort of started working in agencies. I did that for a brief period of time before I then took a job as uh, the press officer for a cricket club here in the UK. So one of the leading cricket clubs here, and I was with them for about 5 years, I would say. And the interesting thing about going from an agency into in-house is always, you're never a specialist in when you're in-house. You're
Yeah,
always a jack of all trades. Like,
yeah,
somebody, you're doing the PR, but somebody decides that a web article needs to be updated, and it's like, well, Simon does all the words. Like, we'll ask him to update the website, and
yeah,
you can say, well, I don't know how to, I don't know how to, edit, HTML or whatever. And they'll say, well, just work it out. And so you do. And then you become the email marketing guy. Then you become the
yeah,
social media marketing guy. Then you become the out of home guy. And then, and it's just kind of, there's usually such a small team when you're in-house, anywhere, that you kind of pick up all of those sorts of things. And so that was what gave me the broad perspective, of being able to do multidisciplinary marketing activity, I would say. Um, so such that, and again, really lucky to be doing it with one of the leading sports teams in the UK, or certainly within their sport, because you had a natural interest, right? So I wasn't just kind of playing with this sort of stuff. This was, we were working with professional athletes who are well known in the UK, or certainly well known to cricketing audiences across the world. And so the things that we would do, we didn't have huge budgets, but we had enough budget to be able to make stuff go. We had a huge audience to be able to talk to, and a generally sympathetic audience, as sports teams generally have, particularly if they're winning. So we had that flexibility to kind of learn those different types of marketing with marketing that was going to be, going to fundamentally achieve what marketing should do, right? Which is go out into the world, get feedback. We got to see whether people liked the stuff we were doing, whether it resonated, whether people found it controversial. So we had that sizable enough audience to be able to get it out into the world. And like I say, an interesting enough cast of characters to be able to bring that to life. And so that when I then moved out of that company and went into agency life, it then gave me a multitude of different ways that I could go. So after that, I did do a little bit in a social media agency. I did do a little bit in a content team. I did a bit with an SEO team. I kind of was able to kind of move around all of those things because I'd done it at a basic level through the in-house work I'd done.
But was it similar structure in marketing as we have now, considering the fact that back then, social media was not that big, search engine optimization. I don't know. I was not in marketing back then. I was a high school student, so I have no idea. So was it like very different? Did you have like copywriters like we have now? And was all of those disciplines different, like email marketing, social media, SEO content? Or was it somewhat similar as we have today?
I think it's interesting. I think, remember, I'm talking at the very beginning of social media now. Like I say, in 2008 or 9, whatever it was, where I was kind of talking to my boss about social media, she still thought it was something that only 14-year-old girls use. And so this concept of content, I think, really wasn't valued in anything like the way that we understand it to be now. Because content back then was seen as this thing that you can only really afford to do if you were a big company. You might make a TV ad if you were Nike or Audi or Coca-Cola or whoever. You might make a TV ad, and that would be considered a hero piece of content. But for the rest of us, we didn't. Everybody else outside of that, you didn't really make images. You didn't really, you might take product photography, but you didn't have really a channel or a need to put content out about yourself. Content would be writing. You'd write a letter or an email or something like that to your customers. And it really only became when social media came out. I think that people started to realize, we need to have lots of things to say about ourselves, and we need to, and by say I mean words, but also images and video and even audio. All of these things suddenly became, I think, a focus for people, and that we need to do them. And then over the sort of the 15 years that's kind of followed from that, I suppose it's only been a case of, with the growth of social media, people have felt like there is this greater need to do it and do it well. And that's where you start to get, the designers, copywriters, videographers, these sorts of people have, I think, really come to the fore. And now I'm not sure whether we've quite realized this fully yet in the industry as a whole, but I think for me, certainly, content creators are the most important part of any marketing mix that you would have. You wouldn't believe the number of times I'll speak to a client or somebody who's potentially thinking about being a client, and we'll talk explicitly about we'll talk only about channels. It'll be like, we want to run Facebook ads, we want to do email marketing, we want to build a new website, we want to have some out of home, billboards on the side of the street. And they'll say, so bring on a Google Ads, advertiser, or let's bring on an email marketer. And all the time I'm saying to them, yes, by all means, but we need a strong core of writers, designers, and videographers, if you could afford to, but certainly writers and designers who understand our tone of voice, understand our visual identity, know how to make the messages that you're trying to convey interesting and different and new. And like I say, I feel like that nowadays I put that as my priority when I'm onboarding a client. I'm like, we need to get our content team sorted first, and then we'll work out what channels we'll run. I don't think that's necessarily considered across the board, but I think we're close to that being the place. And like I say, generative AI content is probably only going to accelerate that even further, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree that. I mean, obviously, we're gonna talk about AI more a little bit later, but AI only like raises the level, and it's a very good tool for me as a creator too. I
Yeah,
use it almost every day. So.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting. And also, yeah, I have this question. So your LinkedIn bio says that you have worked with brands like Audi, Masterclass, Lenovo, and others. So my question is, how was the dynamic of working with these well-known brands, and what challenges did you come across while working with them? Because me personally, I used to working with early stage startups, or maybe even like Series A, Series B, which have like quite different content marketing needs, and they need really this brand awareness because almost nobody knows about them, and you need to but when you have those kinds of brands, I mean, Audi, for example, like everybody knows about you know
Yeah.
so what how do you approach marketing there, and what does the everyday uh process look like doing marketing for those kinds of brands?
Well, obviously, for a brand like that, you are you're doing, amazing work. You have the budgets and the team and the capacity and everything else to do amazing work, and it's stuff that lots of people will have seen and will have interacted with in the past and those sorts of things. So that's obviously the opportunity. Um, and coming with that is the ability to be able to just brainstorm freely, and to
Yeah.
be able to sit there and say, well, wouldn't it be amazing if we got a car to drive around a shopping center, in the middle of a department store or something like that. You have that ability to be able to come up with crazy ideas like that and say, and it's not that crazy, right? Like there's a possibility you might be able to get that to happen, which we did with working with Audi. So, and it also means that you're not only within your own agency, and I was working at a social media agency at the time, but so you have some amazingly talented, top of their game individuals who are working on those sorts of things within your own agency. But with a brand like Audi, your agency isn't the only one doing stuff. So you're then having a meeting with the team that's doing the TV ad. You're then having a meeting with the team that's doing the PR and the SEO and everything else. And all of those are kind of top of their game companies as well, agencies as well. So you have this amazing opportunity to not only do amazing work, but to learn from really, really incredible people. And again, a brand like Audi really teaches you the power of having a strong brand. It's everybody can tell you that Audi's tagline is Vorsprung-Durchtechnik, and anybody who's into their cars understands what Vorsprung-Durchtechnik means, and then that gives you an entire framework and a frame of reference to talk, thereafter, and to make yourself different to a BMW or a Mercedes or whoever else it is you want to be talking about. One of the downsides of it is that you're a very, very small cog in a very big pond, and it's an interesting one because actually there's a story that involves Audi that is what interested me in going out and working with startups that was kind of the catalyst for it. I was working with Audi in I think it was 2015 when the VW emissions scandal happened. That Audi was part of Audi's part of the VW group, and and so the whole VW group was found to be sort of fiddling their measurements for the emissions that they were putting out. And obviously Audi was implicated in that. And so me as being part of the team that was on the social media for them, we were working day in, day out, late nights, sleeping on the office floor, all this sort of stuff, trying to deal with the kind of the fallout of this story and trying to sort of protect Audi's reputation. And this must have gone on for several weeks, and then kind of a month or so after the news had first broken, the story's kind of off the front pages. People are not really talking about it anymore. And we kind of went back to sort of business as usual with Audi. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? All that effort, all that time, all that energy that I put into trying to support Audi on their marketing at that point, I'm not sure it made any real difference. Because Audi has such an amazing reputation. They are
Yeah.
such a huge car brand. You know, we looked at metrics like how many cars they'd sold, and they were, the difference between that, that in the middle of this huge scandal and the norm was kind of negligible. And it was also around about the time that I was starting to read an awful lot about kind of, Whedon and Kennedy, who obviously, were sort of primarily responsible for getting Nike from being this tiny little shoe company in Oregon, to being what they are today. And I remember hearing about, Dan Whedon, coming up with Just Do It. And I remember thinking, wow, what an amazing thing, because back in the day that Nike brought them on, like Dan Whedon was just a friend of Phil Knight's, right? The founder of Nike. He wasn't, that Whedon and Kennedy were not the company that they are today. And so essentially here's like a small marketer in a tiny little agency in the middle of nowhere in America, working with this tiny little shoe company. And through the kind of the perfect alchemy of those two people, obviously a fantastic founder, amazing brand, but also Whedon and Kennedy kind of supporting them, they both managed to grow to what they are today. And I remember thinking, that's what we're all in marketing for, right? Anybody who's in marketing, that's why we do it. We want to be able to be the guy or the woman who's able to say at the end of it, yeah, I took Nike from being this tiny little shoe company in the middle of nowhere to being Nike. That's the best thing any marketer can put on their CV is to be able to say that sort of thing. And I was like, I don't have the opportunity to do that when I'm working with a global brand. Whereas if I go out on my own, and around about the same time, I had my daughter, my first child. And so, my kind of personal circumstances changed quite a bit anyway. And I was just like, well, I know all this stuff. Now that I know how meticulous a brand like Audi or Lenovo or MasterCard or Lavazza, now that I know how meticulous they are about brand identity, tone of voice, visual identity, brand values, all of these sorts of things, these are the same principles that I can apply to smaller companies, but the opportunity to be able to be that guy who takes, with the Nike story is just way more than I have the opportunity to do in an agency in London. And that was what kind of got me into starting up X-CMO, and gave me the opportunity to do that.
Very inspiring story. Yeah, I totally agree to that. When you work in a big corporation, and that's the reason why I don't really refuse anyone, but like that's the reason why I love working with early stage startups, that whatever decisions you make has like a massive impact. And as much as sometimes it can be like, devastating, stupid decision, it might destroy the whole brand, but also at the same time, it might be something that helps them grow so much. And the impact you're making, it's like sort of like an instant reward that you get from like the actions that you take. So I totally agree about the corporations too. Like, it doesn't matter what you do with the brand like Nike or Lenovo at the moment. It will not, there's no way that it's gonna have as big impact as like working with smaller startups and making this calculated and already learned marketing moves.
Yeah, 100%.
Totally. And this takes us to the next next topic of our story. So after that, I think this story has inspired you to move on and find X-CMO. My question is, how are you bringing the big brand knowledge to the little guys? So, like, what are the learnings that you took from your experience working with big brands and applying them to so-called little guys? And what are the major differences between working with those two?
Yeah, so I think probably it's important that I start by giving a brief explanation as to how I work with them. So I use what's now referred to as the fractional CMO model. When I went out on my own, I sort of realized that I know a little bit about a lot, but not, I can't do anything. I can't sell myself as a web developer or an email marketer or an SEO or whatever. So I was sort of looking at the time, and this is like 7 years ago. I was sort of looking for, like, when you're an account manager, as I was when I was in these agencies, I was like, well, I have a skill set. I have a skill set of being able to kind of manage projects for clients, understand what good looks like, represent the client, and all of these sorts of things. But there wasn't really an opportunity. There's no really real agencies that do that consultants are sort of as close as you would usually get to that sort of model. But the thing that I found with consultancy was that, my mum owned a load of businesses when I was growing up, and she used to work with lots of consultants across lots of different different expertise. And one of the things that she used to complain about was consultants. They sit and they give advice and they help, but fundamentally they then pass it back over to you as the owner of the business and say, right, you go away and implement this. And what she always really wanted was somebody to go, well, what we need to do is X, Y, and Z. And you know what? I'm going to pick that up and do it for you. So you need a new website. I'm going to go and build you a website. I know your business as well as you do. I'm going to take that forward and do that for you and make sure it's a really good website and whatever. And so that was kind of essentially what I was doing. And for the longest time, that didn't really have a tag or a label. And it's really, I think, only in the last sort of 3 or 4 years that I would say the concept of the fractional C-suite, I would say, has really sort of become popular knowledge, primarily through startups and through what they do. And like I say, a kind of as with a view to managing not only the sort of the strategic and the top level stuff that a consultant would do, but also getting the hands dirty sort of stuff as well. So being able to bring that sort of stuff to the fore. In terms of how it differs or how it's similar to the work that I've done previously, obviously the budgets are not the same as they were, when I worked with Audi. But, what's mad about that is that it was something that I learned when I was working in those big agencies, that actually, yes, budget is makes things an awful lot easier. But it also makes things a little bit lazy as well. And some of the best content that that I've done in my career when I worked at those big agencies was the stuff that kind of came about. There was more. It wasn't about the budget. It was about the insight. So if I give an example about that, so I did a piece of work with Netflix back in the day called Spoiler Foiler. And it was kind of at the time where Breaking Bad was really, really popular and kind of Narcos and House of Cards and all these sorts of things were really popular. And we noticed that that people were kind of getting upset about having spoilers, right? So one of the big things about streaming services is it's kind of non-linear, right? So we used to have this appointment to view. You would watch at 9 o'clock every Monday night, and everybody would watch it at the same time, and you could have this conversation on social media afterwards where you would talk about the plot and what was happening and things like that. And people were getting frustrated at that time because they weren't necessarily watching Netflix the minute the episode had dropped onto Netflix. And so people were kind of then going to Twitter and seeing all this conversation. So we developed this idea that was just basically where it's just a relatively simple piece of coding that basically could show you your Twitter feed with any spoilers taken out. So if there was any mention of kind of, Breaking Bad or any of the characters or any of the, major plot lines or something, it would essentially redact that piece of content. Now, that wasn't a really complicated piece of coding or a really complicated thing to do, but what it did is it showed Netflix customers that they got them. And actually, one of the best pieces of feedback we got, and there's a video online where you can find this, is somebody tweeting Netflix being like, Netflix gets me. Mm. And I remember thinking at the time, like that's the best piece of feedback any marketer can get from the work that they do. This company gets me. This company just understands who I am, what I value, why I like, why I wear their clothes, why I, subscribe to their service, why I, eat my lunch in their restaurant, whatever. If you can really tap into that, because there are deep psychological things that the most famous brands tap into with their customers. And if you can understand them as marketers and replay that stuff back to the customer, and they come back to you and go, oh my God, you get me. Like, you understand who I am and what I'm trying to do. That's what develops that loyalty and the brand advocacy that are so much a part of kind of marketing and communications nowadays.
100%, yeah, 100%. Like you see the impact that you make out of the, I guess it was just like an idea of like, well, let's try, maybe it works. And then the acknowledgement from the customer that, you get me, you really, it's a very powerful story.
And it's interesting, you said earlier, you can take a risk, particularly with a smaller company, but that's a
Yeah,
risk that we took with Netflix, as you say. There's a decent chance nobody bothered using it, and it kind of, it was kind of a waste of time and effort and everything. I think, you said earlier, you can take risks with startups in their marketing. I am a firm believer that if you have a good product, you know, bad marketing can, you know, it can affect it, but it can't completely damage a great product. A great product has a great audience. You only have to see, somebody like Elon Musk at the moment
yeah,
and the way that he is in the world and kind of people's general perceptions of him. And yet, yeah, and you would think that somebody like that would completely kill Twitter and Tesla and all the other stuff he's involved with, and yet people are still buying Teslas. People are
but
still still use Twitter because there are still parts of those companies
yeah,
that people really really relate to, even though fundamentally their head spokesman, and
yeah,
and that is what he is for those two brands, is saying some crazy stuff and doing some crazy things in the world. So bad marketing can affect, but it can't kill a
yeah,
great product. Whereas a great product without marketing, without good marketing, can absolutely be lost. There are definitely companies that have
yeah.
had
There are
great
cases.
products
Yeah,
and
100%.
fantastic founders and brilliant ideas, and they've never got to the place where they could have
Yeah,
been because they've just not been very good about explaining who they are and why it's important and why customers should engage with them. So great marketing can have a massive effect in the positive. Poor marketing, my experience, and again, the Audi story is similar to this.
yeah,
My experience of this is poor marketing or poor kind of brand comms. The risk reward is massively in your favor, I would say, with marketing, because if it comes off, it really comes off. And if it
yeah.
doesn't, people have pretty much moved on inside a couple of weeks, I would say.
Totally, yeah, but I also think that it really depends on the scale. Like if we talk
Mm.
about Elon Musk, like scale is massive there, and as many haters he has, he also has twice as many fanboys.
Yeah,
So it's it doesn't really matter what he does. He will always be appreciated by his fanboys, and he will always be hated by his haters. Especially now when he's together with Trump. That really.
100%. But this is, but like I say, I think this
Yeah,
this this emphasizes the importance of standing out.
yeah,
I mean, and,
totally.
and we live in a world where, again, social media has made it possible for you don't need the money that Elon Musk has in order
Yeah,
to be, to have as big a voice on social media. I mean, all right, he's got a huge voice on social media, but influencers have shown us that anybody can, with a decent, a decent phone and a, enough of the sort of content that people want to watch or engage with or read or whatever it is, that you can have a huge audience, you can make it big without needing to spend a huge amount of money. It's all about standing out and being compelling and saying something or doing something that people want to engage with. And if you can do all of that sort of stuff, and by the way, that's for good and for bad. We all
yeah,
know there are people who use social media channels to say things that they really shouldn't say and that we all wish they wouldn't say, but and do. Um, but what it does mean is that yes, the important thing is not the budget. The important thing is saying something that people are interested in and engaged with, and
yeah,
in an engaging and interesting way. If you
yeah.
can do
The
that, then that's
exactly
important.
the relatability level,
Hmm.
yeah, to your audience. But this actually perfectly takes me to the next topic. So from your experience, what should and sort of like an advice for early stage founders, what should early stage founders keep in mind when thinking about their startup marketing strategy when they have nothing? They just have a product, they spent all this time, and mostly because it's 50-50 that some founders are more product driven, they don't really care about marketing. Some founders are very outspoken and they already have this massive social media following. So for those founders who are very product and engineering driven, what advice would you give to sort of get attention for their great product and eventually start making sales to survive the company?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. People believe that brand values, tone of voice, um, brand identity is kind of only for big guys, and you
Yeah.
sort of worry about that once you've made enough sales. And so you focus on the sales first and foremost. Make sure that as many people buy your product as you possibly can. Then you generate some money. Then you spend it with a marketing agency, and you get a brand personality and do all of that sort of stuff. And yet, I often like to pull that right back to first principles, right? Like if you remember like the really earliest forms of marketing, which were literally markets, right? They were literally food stalls on the side,
Yeah.
in the middle of a town center or whatever. You have to be noticed. And know, like, and trust we talk about in marketing all the time. You have to be known, you have to be liked, you have to be trusted before anybody buys anything from you. So, that old adage, people buy from people, is sort of true, but it goes deeper than that. People buy from personalities. They buy from, so, you could have three or four people selling the same produce on a market, but which is the guy you're going to go to? It's going to be the one who makes a bit of a joke, who calls you out by name, who has a bit of a personality and kind of draws you into them. You're going to go to that person, even if sometimes we know that we don't necessarily always buy the cheapest version of the product that we're trying to buy. Why do we do that? We do that because there's something in us that just kind of thinks, I'm going to go for the company that gets me, that understands me, that I'm going to go to the market seller who I like the most or I trust the most, even if he's more expensive, even if it's harder to get to him because he's right at the end of the market stall or whatever. I'm going to go to that person. And so, if we think about like small companies and startup, founders and things like that, one of the most important things you can do in the early stages as a startup founder is to network. It's to get out into the world, meet other people, go to events, tell them what you do, tell them what your product is, and see how the people resonate with that. But on top of that, networking is not about selling. Networking is a very, very poor converter to sales. What you're really doing networking for is know, like, and trust. You want to get out there to speak to a bunch of people so that they know who you are, so that they like you, and so that they trust you, so that when it gets to the point that they're wanting to buy whatever it is that you sell, then it's like, I really need a insert product here. I'm going to give Simon a call because I remember he was that guy that I spoke to that one time at that event, and he was really, and I liked him. Like, he seemed like a really funny guy or a clever guy or whatever. I don't know, whatever. That so networking is all about your own brand persona, your brand personality. Because in the early days as a startup founder, your persona, your personality is your company's persona, your brand personality. And so working on that, doing that, um, doing that deliberately. There's one of my favorite quotes is Dolly Parton, and she says, "Find out who you are and do it on purpose." You know, doing that work early doors to find out who you are and doing it on purpose to find out that, okay, people think about, and I'm talking about from a company perspective now, people think that our product is this and this is what it does. So let's talk about that aspect of it. People think my product makes their life easier. So let's focus on how much easier it makes people's lives. Or people think my product is the best made product out there. It's way more expensive than its competitors, but it's really, really top quality craftsmanship. We'll focus on that thing. Or people think that this is, that our competitors are stuffy and corporate and stuff like that, and so these guys are trying to stick it to them. Fine, find out that and then do it on purpose. And if you can develop that brand persona, that personality early, that is the sort of thing that I think makes a massive difference to the revenue element and the sales element at a later stage. And actually develops that loyalty and that advocacy that, again, are so big a part of kind of the way people buy nowadays, I'd say.
100%, yeah. The personality can be a core element of whatever you're building in the long run, and then you can just build up on those, have different initiatives that are, of course, aligned to this personality. But first, figure out these exact, why did you even start this solution? What was your driver, and who are you as a like,
Mm-hmm.
like this. quote from Jeff Bezos. I mean, overheard, and everybody's saying it, but like, branding is what people talk about you when you're not in the room. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. What do you want people to talk about when you're not there?
exactly.
100%. Very interesting. And now we're moving on to a little bit more exciting. I mean, the good part of the conversation. When we met at Slush, we had
Hmm.
a very interesting talk about your concept called the marketype concept,
Hmm.
which I found very interesting. I'm a big fan of brand archetypes. There are 12 of them. I've even had a talk about it at TechChill. But you told me you came up with this concept called marchetype, where you have like 16 different types of personalities, and I found it very, very interesting. So tell us about that. What does it entail, and yeah, how many archetypes are there, and how do they differ?
Yeah, 100%. And market types is kind of the common thread through the work that I've done as X-CMO and the work that I'm doing now in Kayako, which is the generative AI side of what I do. Um, yeah, archetypes, as you say, comes from the Jungian idea of the archetype. So, for those who aren't familiar with it, Jung was a psychologist who kind of trained under Sigmund Freud, and he studied this idea of archetypes. Archetypes being these kind of patterns of behavior, which we all recognize, right? A really simple example that I often give is this idea of the caregiver, right? You read any book, you watch any film, engage with any piece of art, and if there is a caregiver character, a mother, a sort of a grandparent who looks after a child, whatever, if there is anybody like that in that particular story, you can pick them out in a second, and you can often pick them out just simply by looking at them if it's in a movie or whatever. Uh, so and Jung basically said these archetypes exist in society. So they exist in art, but they exist in religion as well. So the Virgin Mary, if you're Christian, or there are other versions of it, of that sort of motherly character in all the kind of in a lot of the world religions. They exist in religion. They exist in art. Um, they're sort of this like shorthand, right, that we all kind of use to be able to look at people or characters in movies or whatever and be able to go, okay, I understand them. I instinctively know I need to cheer for the hero. I need to root against the bad guy. I need to, I can trust the caregiver character, all of these sorts of things. And they're kind of this shorthand for what we do. And ultimately that's what we're doing in marketing, right? Like in marketing, there's always this thing about how long do we get to make an impression on our customer? If they watch the whole of a TV ad, it might be 30 seconds that they get to engage with us. If they're scrolling on Instagram, it might be a fraction of a second that they get to be able to see our message. If it's a billboard on the side of the road and they're driving their car, it might be fractions of a second as well. So how do we as marketers convey to our audience that we are the ones to be trusted, or we're the brand that's going to help them to overcome anxiety or fear or a lack of confidence or whatever? How do we convey all of that to them in a way that they understand, and we don't need all of the words and a 30-minute documentary about us and all that sort of stuff? How do we do all that? And that's where I really sort of felt like archetypes kind of came into it. Alongside studying archetypes, Jungian archetypes, and like you say, there are 12 of them. So that's the caregiver, the artist, the hero, the magician, and another, however many there are, out of those that kind of come up. Alongside that, I've always been interested in psychology. I've always been interested in human psychology and how we understand the world and how we portray ourselves. And that's a large part because I grew up all over the world. So every time I went to a new country, growing up, I felt like this need to convey my personality to people, to kind of make my personality and kind of understand other people's personalities and their intentions and those sorts of things. And so I've always kind of got fascinated in that. And after a while, because I was trying to sort of marry this idea as kind of, how do we do this for small companies, startup companies who don't have the budget to be able to do the technique thing? How do we convey that sort of information quickly and compellingly for a small company? And I was like, well, if we can marry human psychology, humans looking to understand who they are and what they're trying to achieve, looking to brands to help them to do that, right? So people believe that because they drive a certain type of car, it says something about them. It says they've made it, or it says they're fun, or it says they're attractive, or whatever, right? People believe that if they eat at McDonald's, it says something about them. Whereas if they eat at Pret a Manger, it says something different about them. People believe that because they wear Nike or whatever, that says something about them. So we have these people. So on one hand, you have people who are looking to develop a person, an idea of who they are as a person. You have these brands that are trying to say to them, if you want to be that sort of person who looks like they made it drive a Mercedes-Benz or drive a Ferrari or whatever. And in between them, you have this psychology, right? You have this thing of like people wanting to be able to. You have these different psychological types of that exist in the world that brands are trying to tap into, and that people need to kind of see as in order to kind of understand who they are. And like I say, so I combine it with like Myers-Briggs, type indicator, sort of red, blue, green, yellow theory, all of these sorts of things. And I just kind of tried to keep mapping them on top of each other. I just kind of kept trying to go, well, okay, that, a red personality type is kind of like an extroverted sensing type in kind of Myers-Briggs and all of these sorts of things. I started trying to map them on top of each other. And in the end, what I came out with is basically this marker types model that kind of combines them all and just sort of says, well, look, these are common traits that come through all of these different psychoanalytical tools that seem to indicate what people want to say about themselves and how they want to portray themselves to the world and how they'd like to be treated. And the final twist that kind of really came to me and kind of, I think, really sets marker types apart from these other models is reading Donald Miller's book on building a story brand. And the really interesting thing that came out of that for me is he talks in that book about the most important thing you can remember as a marketer is the customer is the hero and you are the guide. In every single story, and again, this is where it links back to archetypes, right? In every single story, there is a hero character, and then quite often, the hero goes on his hero's quest or hero's journey, and along the way, they meet these guide characters, a Gandalf, a Yoda, somebody like this, who gives them a certain thing, teaches them how to fight, teaches them, how to connect with their inner emotions, educates them, gives them confidence, whatever it is. But these characters meet these guides along the way, and it's the guides who are the ones who are formative in trying to get that hero from the first place to kind of where they end up. And if we as marketers can understand those different things that we can give to our hero customers, then that's the most important thing. So what you end up with is this model that says, okay, all of these marker types are guides. They all exist to help their customers achieve a certain thing based on the psychological underpinnings of how people actually work and the sorts of things they actually want. They want to be smart. They want to be attractive. They want to be confident. They want, all of these sorts of things. And if we can tap into those different things and give that, and then that makes all the language and all the imagery and all the brand values and everything else that we talk about later much, much easier because we know what we stand for and we know what we're doing for our customers. And like I say, so I came up with the market types model, and I've been using that with my clients for the last 5 years because it became this way that I would say to the startups, well, you need to talk in an interesting way. And it just happens to be the thing that most of my clients go, oh, I've never heard it talked about in that way before. I've never heard that before. And actually, it does. You start getting them coming back to you and being like, oh, now that I know I'm my customer's best friend, now I get it. Now I know exactly how I should talk to them. I'm looking at the way that I actually text my best friends, and we're writing our social media posts like I text my best friend. Or because I'm their lover, or because I'm their professor, or because I'm their advocate, or because I'm their coach, or whatever. It completely changes the way that they talk to their customers and the way they show themselves. And then it was that, like I say, when generative AI came along and people started talking about, well, you can now get, ChatGPT to write marketing copy for you. I was like, yeah, but the same still applies. It's still not simply enough to simply go, hey, we're Nike, we make great shoes. They're relatively inexpensive. They'll help you run fast. Like, that's still not a compelling marketing message. And so that's when my co-founder
Yeah.
and I started to take the marketypes model that fundamentally has all these rules in terms of how you talk and how you show yourself to your customers, and apply it to the generative AI and say, we're going to teach the generative AI why certain images work, why certain words work for certain audiences. And if we can do that as part of the prompt engineering, then essentially we can automate that process and make it far, far quicker, which is what all the benefits are of generative AI, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I look at it is that those archetypes and also, the brand archetypes and all of those give brand, like understanding that, give you as a company and early stage founder a direction you can go with. And, the way you can build your communication and all of those essential elements that you're trying to figure out, it is already figured out. You just need to figure out like which path you should take, and then go with it. So that's why I love the conversation that we had at Slush about all of those mark types because it was very eye-opening. But yeah, you briefly mentioned about Gayako AI, which is connected to those
Yeah.
mark types. So yeah, essentially, what is the mission of the company? Why you and your co-founders are taking this startup journey instead of being only just marketers? And why did you decide to take over this challenge?
Yeah, well, and I think this goes right back to something I said right at the beginning of the conversation, which is, historically, content was something that only big companies could do,
Yeah,
and kind of the technology has changed so that now everybody feels this need to be able to create content and create good content, even if it's just about a small company, that doesn't have a huge amount of money to spend on content and things. We all understand this need for content and for content to be good, and yet most of us still don't have the
yeah,
budgets, or indeed necessarily like even the training to understand some of the things I mentioned in my last answer about the importance of making a connection on a psychological level with your customer and talking about them like they're the hero and all of these sorts of things. And the promise of generative AI is the ability to be able to do this stuff quickly, to be able to do it at scale, to be able to do it relatively inexpensively, and and like I say, I think we're in a situation now where there are a lot of startups in the world. There's a lot of people with great ideas trying to create amazing products that will really help other people. Are looking to help save the environment. Move medicine forward, and all these sorts of things. And and some of them will fail because they're not very good at communicating their messages because they don't have the ability to talk and show themselves in a way that makes other people stand up and go, oh, actually this is really important, like we should pay attention, we should buy this product, I should tell my best friend or my parents or whatever it is about this product, whatever. And so that, like I say, that when I saw generative AI, through ChatGPT and sort of, more recently in kind of Midjourney and Runway and these sorts of channels, I realized, this is a way of being able to bring that sort of, bring the production values of a brand like a Nike or a Coca-Cola to any company. It just needs to be prompted correctly. And like I say, I just have that model that I've been sort of, communicating with copywriters and videographers for a few years now. So being able to translate that into prompt engineering didn't seem like that much of a push for me. So Kayako is a kind of collaboration between myself and my co-founder Nick. Nick is the AI, the developer brains behind the operation, and we now have quite a few people who work on the company with us. And like I say, really, our aim is to be able to bring that sort of level of content to small companies and to startups, and with a view to being that Dan Whedon, right? I want to take that small company and help them make it, to the Nike levels, and I think if we do that, for me, that's where we've achieved something.
I love that. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this conversation. I have one final question. So this is a question we ask to everybody. And you, as experienced marketeer and now a founder of a company that's, basically scales marketing for other companies, what would be your advice to anyone who want to kickstart their career in this field in marketing in 2025 already? We've come
Yeah.
far.
So that's a great question because it's so broad. What I would say is, as a startup founder, running a startup is not easy. And anybody who's been in this business will tell you this. It's not easy. You end up putting a lot of time and energy and effort into it. You don't work 9 to 5. You're on it all the time. As much as you possibly can, if you're going to create a startup, it needs to be a thing that it's not work for you when you're thinking about it, in the middle of the night. It's not work for you when you're in the shower getting yourself ready and you're trying to work something out. I was really fortunate. I tried when I came out of COVID. I tried scaling X-CMO in a variety of different ways, and none of them all of them. Some of them may have worked if I'd have put my effort into it and stuff like that. But I remember looking at them as the business models that I was coming up with and thinking, this is not a company that I care about deeply. This is not a company where I really believe it's something that I really want to do for the rest of my life. And it was only when I said, well, I do know the thing that I love. The thing that I love is the marketypes model. The thing that I believe in passionately, the thing that I spend my time, when I'm lying awake in the middle of the night thinking about or whatever, is the marketypes model. And I was like, and at that point, again, remember this is 2021 or so. I'm like, I don't know how this turns into a company. I don't know how this becomes something that's scalable and becomes able to be a business that sells and makes profit and all the rest of it. But I do know that that's the thing that I love the most in the world. And it was only at that point that I started to really get out and talk to people about marketypes and really sell the concept of marketypes. First through doing talks and presentations and stuff like that. But it was through that I then met Nick, and Nick was like, well, have you heard of this like OpenAI thing? Like, I think maybe we could apply this to what I do. And I think if you are able to find that thing that you love from the outset, that you obsess over, that you cannot drop, no matter, if somebody says to you it's not a viable business yet or whatever, you kind of don't care because you go, well, okay, I'll just keep working on it. If you can find that thing, explore it, no matter, even if it doesn't seem like it turns into a business, just explore it, give that a go, because I think that's going to be the key when times get hard later on.
Absolutely, yeah. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Simon. I think it was very good, interesting conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ucha.
I want to wish you best of luck with all of your projects. Thank you very much for listening. See you next time.